Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to part 4 of the build on the Cafe Racer. This is going to be carburetors. So basically all I'm going to be doing is stripping down the carbs that came with the bike. They were part stripped anyway. Strip them down, clean them, make sure everything's alright, rebuild with a new kit, and then set the float heights, bench balance, basically just get them ready then to go onto the bike when the rebuild starts. So that is it, and we'll get cracking on with that right now. I'm going to strip them down, clean them, and rebuild them with new jets and or screws and all that. Hit a bit of a snag though. So this is the carburetor as I got it. It's been semi-stripped already, so I've just been sort of revising what goes where and what's already come off and what's what. But basically there's a few screws, and I think one of the where is it now? It's the air mix screw. Where is he there? As you see, he's snapped off. So I'm gonna have to replace carb number 2. Just face that way. I've numbered them. That's carburetor number 2. Yeah, it was snapped inside, and I used a stud extractor to try and get it out. But I think this was cracked anyway because there was barely any pressure and it snapped off. So bit of a shame, but it doesn't matter. I'll try and get carb number 2 body and replace that. But yeah, we're going to get these stripped and rebuilt. Obviously they've been painted as well, which isn't ideal because all these were covered up with paint, and I'm no expert on carburetors, but I'm pretty certain they're not supposed to be painted over. But oh well, we'll see what we can do with them. So here's the carburetors. They are now, of course, as you can see, stripped down even further. I've split them up individually. I did do this off camera, of course. I'm not going to put anything up. It was actually before I did that. I just doing it as an in-between. The only things I need to do now is, of course, take the floats off. The rest of them are fully stripped, apart from, well, of course, the butterfly valve in there, but that's going to stay on. I'm going to strip the paint off, give them a good clean, make sure there's no blocks, all the small holes and all the passageways. Just get them all nice and cleaned up. All the little bits here for them, these are all going to be replaced, or well, like bits like these, the small screws in it and jets and stuff like that, they're all going to be replaced. I've got some new hex bolts for them to replace these old Phillips head ones, which some of them are okay, but some of them started to strip, so they're just a bit better. But yeah, so I'll get the floats off, get them stripped down fully, and then actually get something to get this paint stripped off so we get to bare metal again, and then we'll start again with them. Okay, so just removing this little filter here where the float ball is at the top. It's on the bigger side. Small screw. And then this slides out like that, and then the filter pops out just like that. Okay, so keep them together there. Okay, so that's the floats out now. I've put them just set behind them, so they need a good clean up. I've also taken these little I'm not too sure what they're called, but there's some sort of gauze filter on them just out of this point here, so I've removed those as well. I believe we've got replacements for them as well. So they are as good as stripped, like I say, apart from the butterfly in there. So yep, we'll get them cleaned up and rebuilt. So I've been doing some cleaning of these carburetors just to show you sort of where I'm at with it. So this is carb body number 3. Is it? Yeah, of course it is. 1, 2, 3. So what I've done is taken the paint off as best I can. Still a little bit more left to go. And then clean the top bits there as best I can. And sort of this is what it was. Of course, the painted side, which is pretty horrendous. I have very briefly scratched over it with a very fine wire brush, but you can see there's a lot of dirt on there. So they're coming together. A bit more time and a bit more effort just to get all these brown bits off. I mean, ideally, yeah, I'd get it in a sort of ultrasonic cleaner and do it properly. But 1, I'm not paying for that service, and 2, I do actually plan to buy myself one of those ultrasonic cleaners, the smaller ones, eventually. Anyway, so I can do them in the future properly, but for now I'm just cleaning them up. This one actually has come up a lot better. But one thing I did notice with this one, carb number 1, is the float pin is very slightly bent. I don't know if you can see it. It's a bit wonky. So the float was sticking. So I'm going to have to replace that at some point. It shouldn't be expensive if I can find it. But yeah, that's where we're at the moment, because I've not touched this one. This is actually a good example of what they were like when I got them. But of course, this is the broken one. So I'm still waiting for that to come. But yeah, getting there, slowly but surely. So let's carry on, shall we? So I've now got the replacement carb body for number 2. And as you can see, it is very clean in comparison to the other ones. This has actually been professionally cleaned. And also the throttle valve there, the butterfly, has been polished. So yes, very tidy. We'll look forward to getting that rebuilt. But what I might do is get this one, because it's immaculate, ready to go. Get this one rebuilt. Still got this one here to clean, so we'll get that cleaned as well today. Carb 4. Yeah, very shiny. Sort of puts the others to shame, really, doesn't it? So I'm going to have to. Oh god, look at the difference. Oh well, I have one shiny one and one terrible. Well, 3 terrible, but oh well. So that is the painted black carb that was what was black, carb number 4, now clean. So that will be ready to be rebuilt. Again, in comparison to the 2, that just is the difference between cleaning it up yourself and an ultrasonically cleaning it. It really does make a difference. So definitely get these done at some point, but for now that is more than enough, and come up quite well actually. I'm very happy with it. I've also cleaned the top of the carb there, the cap that sits on top. I might spray that up though, or try and look into doing some sort of chrome spray just to give it, or re-chroming them properly, because that's about as best I can get it. And I don't particularly like paint on carbs, but on the tops like this, that'll sort of really show up nicely if I do something with it. So yeah, might do that, or even the same colour as the bike, the tank, because I'm going to sort of spray that up candy white, something like that. So maybe I'll spray these up to match it. But yeah, it's a bit tatty, but you know, oh well. And also what I've done, slightly out of focus, is this, the carb slide, the diaphragm and carb slide unit. So as you can see, just on the side there, put a bit of metal polish, cleaned it up. A lot of dirt came off it actually. It's come up really shiny in comparison. I've only done this one, so I will compare the others so you can see the difference. But that's actually come up very well, the slide. So it's sliding much smoother. It's not sort of gripping at all. I'll give that diaphragm a little wipe down just to make sure it's nice and clean. But yeah, that's come up really well. Also got the float ball here, which is ready. That was again completely black, but I've cleaned it all off. It's come up quite nicely, so I might give that a bit of a polish. But they're all clean. So to be honest, what I might do is get this one rebuilt, like mentioned before, get it rebuilt, and then to the point where the float's in. And then once the float's in, get them all built up, 1, 2, 3 and 4, then put them back together, then set the float height, and then sort of bench balance them from there. So not far away now, not far away. I think, to be honest, I'll double check, make sure they are all clean as they should be. This is the other one. Yeah, it's pretty much done, to be fair. And then yeah, then we'll get them rebuilt and get them ready to go on. So let's look forward to that. Right, so all the carbs are now cleaned. Not perfect by any means, but they're at a good standard to work with. So we'll start rebuilding them. I have done one, and I've done it off camera just to see, because I'm using a rebuild kit. I just wanted to make sure that everything was fine and everything was fitting, but it's absolutely fine. So we'll do one on camera just so we can see what we did with that, and we'll rebuild carb number 2, which is the nice professionally cleaned shiny one of the lot. So we'll get that built, so see what process we do to get that done, and then I'll do the other 2 off camera. Once they're all built, I can only go so far at the moment because I made a small error. These bolts that I'd bought are M4, and they were for the float bowl, but unfortunately they're the wrong size. I was supposed to order M5. I didn't actually know that, to be fair. It was just Mikuni float bowl, whatever, bolts. So I thought they were the right ones. Obviously not, but it doesn't matter. I've reordered some M5. I've also ordered the so float ball ones and ones for the top cap there. So I've ordered 32 in total. And I've also ordered some new ones for these, the rail assemblies at the back. So new bolts everywhere, which is great, but they're going to take a bit of time to come, a few days. So I'll rebuild them basically as far as this, just with all the jets and screws and the float and whatever needs. And then once that's done, I'll get the gasket on, get the float bowl on, of course, set the float height, get the float bowl on, and then get the cover on the top once they're cleaned and painted. And then the carbs will be pretty much done. And then once they're done, we'll put them together, fix them up, and then that's it. We can bench balance and they're ready to go on. So hopefully we'll get that done very soon. So I'll get one built up now, just on camera so we can see the process. And like I say, I'll do the rest off camera and we'll go with that. Right, so I've got the carburetor in front of me ready. We're going to get this one built up. This is actually carburetor number 3. Unfortunately, I did build carburetor number 2, but the video failed. So that's very annoying. But anyway, we'll get this done now. So, firstly, what could we do first? We'll get this one here. So forgive me, I don't know some of these part names, but we'll just have to roll with it. So there's this one here. It's sort of a little filter. Now, the original one was a metal filter. This is plastic, so I'm keeping all the original parts anyway, just in case these aren't as good. So that basically just pops in there, and then we get this bracket on, and then get the screw in there as well. So I might have to use 2 hands for this because it's a little bit fiddly. Basically, just put the screw in the top there, and we'll tighten it down. Okay, so that's now nice and tight. Now they're not super tight. I'm not tightening any of these up fully. Just sort of nip them up because they are soft material. If you ever, when they want to come back off again in the future, they will seize on, and they'll just be a pain to get out. These little tiny screws here that I've just put on, I am going to replace them. This one's not too bad, but the other 2 have completely, well, they started stripping, so they have to be cut to turn them into a flathead rather than a Phillips. So I will replace them with some better ones eventually, because I will strip these down again at some point. Okay, so we'll do the, hang on, where's that back bit? There's one on here. I don't know again what it's called. This is a little stubby one. This one here, it's a small stubby type one. That just drops in, just in there like that. So I'll get that tightened down. Okay, that's in there nice and nipped up, and I'm again not too sure what it's called, but I'm assuming it's something to do with the air, as it's the air filter pops onto that side. Okay, we'll do a bit that way there. We'll get these jets in. So we've got the jets at the top, the main jet here, and then the pilot jet just next door to it. And the pilot jet, oh, grab it, so it looks like this. It's not got a pointy pin bit on the end of it. Let's put him in there. Oh, again, just drops in nicely. I'm going to tighten that up. Okay, he's in there now. Now we'll do the main jet. Now this one's a little bit more fiddly because you have to sort of go from inside up and then put the cap on top to hold it in place. Does only go in one way, as there is a little groove. Once it's focused, there is a little groove in there, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little sort of nib on the end there. So I'll have to pause it and have to do this with 2 hands because it is a bit fiddly. Okay, so that's in place there. I just slid it in. I'm holding it with my finger at the top there, So what we need to do now is stick the washer on top, got a little washer there, and then fix it in place. And there we go, that's in quite nicely there. And then all we've got left to do now is the air mix screw, which is of course this side, just like that. So you can put him in there. So firstly, got the spring, make sure there's nothing in there already, which there shouldn't be. Drop the spring in. There is a washer on there, if you can just about see it. It's a very small there, silver washer. So make sure that's in place and then simply drop him in. Ooh, there we go. And then what you want to do with this is tighten it all the way down so it seats correctly, and then just back it off 2.5 turns as per the manual, which I had to double check. But yeah, it's 2.5 turns back on this model. Okay, so that's in there now. Air mix screw in, tightened down, backed off 2.5 turns. So we'll get on to the put the floats back now. Okay, so floats in. We've got the little pin here. It just sort of hangs on there. Drop it in place and then pop the pin in. So again, I'll have to use 2 hands because it's a little bit fiddly. So we can position it like this. Just make sure that sort of drops in the hole there. Ideal. And then we're going to pop the pin in that way. Okay, and then once the pin's in, we just check like that. Nice, moving nice and free. Of course, we'll get the the float heights checked. But we'll do that when they're all together, so we can tip them. It'll be a bit easier to do. But that's pretty much it. So that is all we need. You've got the jets in there. Which one else? One in there. Yeah, happy days. So once those new bolts come, we can get the caps on the top and get the float bowls on with the new ones, and then actually start building them back together again. In fact, there is a gasket here. I won't obviously tighten it down, but I'll put it in place so it doesn't get lost. Nice new gaskets for them. Where does that go? It goes on that way like that. So pop that into place just so it doesn't get lost. Yeah, happy days. So that's now 3 out of 4 done. So we'll get the last one done now. I'll do that off camera and then basically just wait for the bolts. And then we can crack on, and hopefully very soon we'll get the belts balanced and they'll be ready to go on, so we can finish this part of the build. Yeah. So I've got the carburetors here now as built up as I can. Of course, I do need to do the float bowls and the caps on top there, but until the bolts come, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is just put them together so they're essentially one piece, because it won't really matter. I can still do that. I can still check the float heights and then put them back on with them together. So I'm going to do that now. I've replaced the little O-rings on these because the kit did come with O-rings. I wasn't too sure what they were for, but of course they must be for these. So they've got new O-rings on, so that should seal up the fuel and air nicely. Of course, these are clean, so they'll be going back together now to make one piece. So we'll get cracking with that. And I believe the first piece is here, and it'll run across here somewhere, but I'll just double check because I have documented how I've removed them, so we'll just refer back to that and we'll crack on with it. Okay, so I've just flipped them up now, so we've got the that bit facing up, and then they just essentially pop on there. So I'll put the first one in and we'll start putting the these pipes back in, the fuel and air ones, and we'll slowly get them built up. Okay, so there's the first one in just like that, with a nice new shiny Allen bolts there. Make so much of a difference, they really do. So yeah, they're looking well. So now I've got to work out which one goes in where, and then get these hoses back in. Okay, so they just sit in just like that, nicely. So we're going to pop carb number 2 against it, and then bolt that into place. Again, you've got the holes on the side there, they all line up, so we'll pop them in and then get that bolted into place. Okay, just like that. So what we're just going to do is get the rest all sorted out now. So I'll get it built up so they're together on one rail, and then we'll work on doing the... Okay, so that's the carbs now sort of put together with just that rail on the top there, and the hoses are in place. So I'm going to put it on sort of back that way for now. They are slightly loose, and we always tighten them up. That gives it a little bit of play, a bit of leeway. Okay, so upon building them up again, of course I'm sort of assembling the choke side of it now. Come across a very small issue. Well, I hope it's a small issue, but basically, on carburetor number 2 and 3, you're supposed to have these little holes here where the spring and ball bearing go in. Now 3's got it, as this is the standard one, but this is the replacement body number 2, and it hasn't got them. Now I don't really know why. Of course this one has. This is the old one, that's the Brocken one. Where's it gone? There, that way. There, that one's got it. But that one hasn't. Now I have matched up the sides on the holes on the side where the fuel lines and the air lines go in, and they're exactly the same. So I was testing it just with the float there, pushing it in and out, and it was allowing air to go through, of course, so it would be allowing fuel to go through and what have you. But there isn't a hole. So I don't know if I can just get away with not using it. I'm sure I can. But yeah, that's a bit of an odd one, but oh well. Well, sure, we'll just crack on. I'm going to assemble it anyway without it, because there's not really much I can do. I'm not replacing that car body again for the sake of that, because it does work in the sense of fuel and air and what have you, but yeah, just a bit odd. So I'm just going to rebuild it anyway. I'll put the ball bearing in this one and see what happens, really. Alright, well, it's in and it's working, so yeah, we'll just have to cross that bridge when we get to it, I suppose. But it's in and it's working, so that's fine. So yeah, just onto this bit. I'm going to get these cleaned up and then get this one in as well and get ready to get them finished off as soon as the bolts come for the caps. Nearly there now, very nearly there. Okay, just a little bit more. Got that rail on there, the bottom rail. That would be, it's loose, so I can get the float bowls on eventually. Get those other 3 cleaned up, and then get those in place. Set the float heights, and then we'll just sort of sink it, and then it will be ready. But not long to go. Oh, of course, the top bit as well. Get the slides in there as well, and get the caps on. That will be very easy once the bolts come, so we'll get that nipped. But yeah, nearly there, very nearly there. So I'll leave it for now, and we'll crack on in the morning, to be fair. But yeah, not long to go. Okay, so we're continuing doing a bit of cleaning. I've got the float bowls there. I've got 2 left to do, but I'm just going to put them back together and get those cleaned at another time. Got the caps, the top caps here. As you can see, 2 have come back quite nicely, actually. Ish, anyway. They're sort of chrome, looking good. But the other 2 are a bit dead, so they need re-chroming. But what I'm going to do is, I'm going to look into doing either re-chroming them or spraying them a different colour to match the bike, or even just look for a new set of nice chrome ones, because I quite like that, to be honest, nice and shiny on the top. So yeah, we'll get to that, but they're sort of pretty ready to go. We've also got the carb slides here. So one of them, this is the polished one. If I could put them together, you can see the difference, kind of. It is a bit shinier, so I'm going to clean the other 3 and then they'll be ready to go in. I've checked the diaphragms are all spot on. Again, a little wipe down. But yeah, I think we're nearly ready now to put it all back together. So we'll get those done, we'll check the float heights, and then we will get them synced to finish off. Okay, so we've pretty much finished with the top bit. We can get the slides in now to get them out of the way. With these, I noticed that this bit was on the top of this one, so this is, of course, for the throttle cable, which is on the master carb, or carb number 3. So this is how that's controlled. So that needs to bear in mind that that's the one that goes on there and sits just sort of above that, if you like. So yeah, one to know. So that one's carb number 3, but the rest doesn't really matter where they go. So we'll get them on, we'll get the slides and get them on, and get that tightened up. Now when we get these in, you've got to bear in mind that on the diaphragm there's this little lip here, and that sort of lines up with that little bit on there. So when you put them in, just make sure that they are lining up, and we can just simply slide it down and then make sure it's seated properly, and then that's there and that's it. So we'll get that one, the rest of them, before we quash them, make sure they're seated correctly. So that's one in there. Just make sure it's sort of flush and it sits in nicely all the way around, because if you don't, it'll kink it and it'll damage the diaphragm, and that's not what you want at all, because you have to replace the whole thing. So that's in nicely, so we'll get the cap on that one. Okay, so the nice new bolts here to put them in. Bit of copper grease. I am going to get some washers. The other ones are a bit rusty, so I am going to put some washers on, but they've not arrived yet. So I'm just going to put them together quite loose, and then get the washers on at a later date. Obviously, one thing you do have to do is make sure you put the goddamn springs in, because if you don't, they ain't going to work properly. So let's do that now. Right, so when you put them together properly and put the springs in, they will work as they should and not stick to the top and leave you wondering what on earth is going on. So that is absolutely spot on. So they're done. So the caps are on, that's fine. So now we'll get to checking the float height, and then once that's set and within tolerance, we can then get the gaskets on, get the float bowls on, get them all tightened up, just double check everything's all right with it, and then we'll bench sink it. Got a feeler gauge for that, so we'll get cracking with that afterwards. But for now, yeah, let's get the floats checked. Right, setting the float heights. Now I have checked the manual for this to check the tolerances. It needs to be set to 22.3 mil, and it's allowed 0.5 mil on either side. So that's 22.8 and 21.8. Anywhere between that, you're all right. So what I'm going to do is basically just tip it back to allow this to dangle, and then slowly tip it the opposite way. I don't know if you can see, just so the float is basically on that pin. It's not going to focus in, is it? On that pin just in there, it needs to just rest on the top. If you can just about see, if I push it in like that, there you go. The top of that pin has actually got a little spring mechanism, and it compresses in. We don't want that to happen. What we need to do is allow it just to sit on top of it like that, and then get our measurements. I won't go into too much details. I mean, it is a bit tricky and it's difficult to show you on the camera, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the first one. I'm going to rattle through it just to see what they are, because I don't think they're that far out, to be fair. So we'll give it a whirl. We've got the vernier calipers there. You can't. The manual does say use a ruler, but I'm just not going to do that. So we'll have a look at the first one and see what we're working with. All right. So I'm going to set the vernier calipers to 22.31. Obviously, it's very, very difficult to get that to 0, so it's locked at that. But that will absolutely do. And then I'm going to put it against them, and just to see how far away it actually is, and if needs be, we can do some minor adjustments by quite simply, out of the focus there, just bending this backwards or forwards depending on where it needs to be. So we'll get cracking with that anyway. I'll get the measurements, get them all set, and then we'll get the float bowls on there. Right, that's the float heights all set. So they are now as good as close as I can get to 22.3. I'll be surprised if you can get it bang on every time, because getting this to bend backwards and forwards exactly how you need it is quite difficult. That's why you've got that tolerance. It's only very fractional, so it is pretty small anyway. But yeah, to be honest, like 22.3, 22.2, 22.4 sort of thing. You know, they're not far off at all. So yeah, happy with that. We'll get the gaskets on, get the float bowls on, and then we'll sink it, bench sink. Okay, so that's the float bowls on now, and they're all nipped up nice and tight. Well, not too tight, but tight enough. That's this rail on there, that's nice and tight, and then that's all sort of, well, I don't know, it's not set, but it's on. So all we need to do now is balance the throttle valves, the butterflies there. So I've actually finished work, so I'm going to have to go home, so I'm going to do it afterwards. Okay, so we've got the carbs here now ready to be synced, and what we're going to do is we're going to get a feeler gauge. I've got a feeler gauge here, and it's at it's the 0.15, and what we're going to do is start with carburetor number 3, so as if this is the back of the carb where the air filter would be on, so it sits on the bike that way. So this is carb number 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now we start with number 3. because number 3 is adjusted with this one, which of course does all of them. You can't independently adjust this one, so it's off there. So what I've done is I've wound it all the way in. So for example, it would be, let's say, high idling if it was on the bike, all the way in, and then that gives that valve then set to what it's set at. Once this one's done, we then do number 1, we then do number 2, and then 4. So all I'm doing is putting this down the gap there. It fits in, it's tight, but it moves, there's a bit of resistance. So all we're doing is checking to see the similarities between. So if I try this one, that barely goes in, that's very tight. So that one's slightly different. Number 2, that won't even go in there. And number 4, that's quite loose. So you can see they're all different. So all we're doing is just basically syncing them up so they're the same as number 3. That way, when we come to adjust them on the throttle at the back here, with that small screw, they all do the same thing. So it gives you a chance then to be able to actually sync them properly, which we will be doing when they're on the bike running with the machine. So what I'm going to do is just crack on with that now. I'm going to get them to a very similar sort of resistance using this, and then we'll check it out. Okay, and that is it. That is done. They are now synced up. There's getting a similar amount of resistance on each valve, so I'm quite happy to say that that can be done for now. That'll give me a fighting chance of when it actually comes balancing them up properly. But they're complete. The floats are in, they're set, the heights, they're synced, all the new parts are in, so they are now ready really to go on the bike. So I'm going to wrap them up, keep them safe, and when the time comes, when it starts to come into the rebuild, we'll get them on the bike, and fingers crossed they're okay. Of course, like I said, if there is any problems, we can quickly whip them off, strip them down and start again, or find out what the problem is. But I'm sure, from what I've looked in those, there is no reason why those won't work and they won't fire the bike up, and it should run okay until it's properly synced, properly balanced. But we'll get to that when it comes to it. But that is it. That is all I'm going to do with this part. I'm not going to go too much into it now. That's done with the carburetors, so that's that part done. So we'll look forward to the next part, which I probably will do the front end rebuild or the rear end rebuild, because we'll start sort of looking in now to getting the bike back to a rolling frame. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please like and subscribe, and look forward to the next installment. Thank you very much.